The dust devil rose from the parched earth like a ghost, spinning across the road just as Sarah Garrett's worn boot touched the ground outside the stagecoach, and she wondered if it was an omen of what awaited her in Bannack, Montana territory. She stood there for a moment, letting the autumn wind of 1877 tug at her faded black dress while the other passengers hurried past her toward the hotel. The town stretched before her in shades of brown and gray, buildings that had seen better days lining a street rutted with wagon tracks. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks already dusted with early snow that promised a harsh winter ahead. "Miss, you need help with your trunk." The stage driver was looking at her expectantly, one hand already on her single piece of luggage. "No, thank you, I can manage." Sarah reached for it herself, ignoring the way her arms trembled with exhaustion. She had been traveling for 3 weeks straight, ever since she received the letter about the teaching position. Ever since she decided she could not spend one more day in St. Louis, where every corner held a memory she wished to forget. The driver shrugged and climbed back onto his perch, already calling to the horses. Sarah watched the stage roll away, taking with it her last connection to everything she had known. She was 23 years old, alone in a mining town hundreds of miles from anywhere, with exactly $17 to her name and a heart so thoroughly broken she sometimes forgot it was still beating. "You must be the new schoolteacher." Sarah turned to find a woman in her 50s approaching, her face kind despite the hardness that frontier life etched into everyone who stayed long enough. She wore a clean apron over a practical brown dress, her graying hair pulled back in a sensible bun. "I am Sarah Garrett." She extended her hand. "Martha Simmons. I run the boarding house where you will be staying. The school board arranged it. Let me help you with that trunk. My husband is just over at the Mercantile, but between the two of us we can manage. I do not want to be a bother." "Nonsense. We are glad to have you. The children have been without proper schooling for near 6 months now since Mrs. Henderson passed. Cancer took her, poor soul." Martha had already grabbed one end of the trunk. "Come on then. It is not far." The boarding house was a 2-story structure that looked sturdier than most of the buildings they passed. Martha kept up a steady stream of conversation as they climbed the steps, talking about the town, the miners, the handful of ranchers who brought business to Bannack. Sarah listened with half an ear, exhaustion making everything feel slightly unreal. Her room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the street. After Martha left her to rest, Sarah sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her hands. They were shaking again the way they had been for months. Ever since Thomas. She would not think about Thomas. She had promised herself that. But the promises we make to ourselves are the easiest to break, and as Sarah lay down on the unfamiliar bed in the unfamiliar town, his face swam before her closed eyes. Thomas, with his charming smile and his promises. Thomas, who had courted her for 2 years, who had spoken of marriage and children and a future together. Thomas, who had married another woman 4 months ago, a woman with more money and better connections, while Sarah had been left to face the pitying looks and whispered gossip alone. She had been so certain he loved her, so certain that hope was not a foolish thing. Now she knew better. Hope was dangerous. Hope led to heartbreak. She would teach the children of Bannack, earn her living, and never, ever let herself hope for anything more than that again. The next morning dawned cold and clear. Sarah dressed carefully in her best teaching dress, a dark blue wool that was only slightly worn at the cuffs. She pinned her blonde hair into a tight bun, studying her reflection in the small mirror over the washstand. Her blue eyes looked too large in her pale face, shadowed with the kind of weariness that sleep could not cure. But she straightened her shoulders and went downstairs to face whatever came next. The school was a single room at the edge of town, rough-hewn logs chinked with mud, a stone chimney at one end. Inside, 15 children ranging from about 6 to 14 sat on wooden benches, watching her with open curiosity. Sarah introduced herself, took attendance, and began the work of determining what each child knew so she could plan her lessons. She was helping the youngest group with their letters when the door opened. Sarah looked up, ready to greet another student, and found herself staring at the tallest man she had ever seen. He had to duck to come through the doorway, his shoulders nearly spanning the width of the frame. He wore typical ranch clothes, denim pants and a work shirt, a hat in his hands that he turned nervously as he stepped inside. His face was weathered by sun and wind, with lines around his eyes that spoke of someone who spent his days squinting at distant horizons. He was perhaps 30, with dark hair and eyes the color of coffee. "Miss Garrett, I am Lucas Shepard. I run a cattle ranch about 5 miles south of town." His voice was deep and quiet, the kind of voice that made you lean in to hear better. "I was hoping to speak with you about my niece and nephew." Sarah rose from where she had been kneeling beside the youngest students. "Of course, Mr. Shepard. Children, continue practicing your letters. I will be just a moment." She stepped outside with him into the crisp morning air. Up close, he was even taller than she had thought, and she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. There was something solid about him, something that spoke of reliability and strength. It made her immediately suspicious. "My brother passed 2 years back," Lucas said without preamble. "Pneumonia. Left behind 2 children, Emma and Jack. They are 8 and 10 now. They have been living with me since then, and I have been doing my best, but I know they need proper schooling." "Why have they not been attending school?" He looked uncomfortable. "The last teacher, Mrs. Henderson. She and I had some disagreements about teaching methods. She was fond of the switch, believed in harsh discipline. I pulled the children out after Emma came home with welts on her hands for getting her sums wrong." His jaw tightened. "Nobody hurts those kids." "Not while I am alive to prevent it." Something in his fierce protectiveness made Sarah's throat tighten. "I do not believe in corporal punishment, Mr. Shepard. I believe children learn better through encouragement and patience." Relief washed over his face. "That is good to hear. Real good." "So you would not mind having them in your school?" "Of course not. That is what I am here for. You may bring them tomorrow morning." He nodded, then hesitated. "There is one more thing. Emma, she does not talk, has not said a word since her parents died. Doctor says there is nothing wrong with her voice, it is just something in her mind. Some kind of grief, I suppose. She can read and write, though, and she is smart as a whip. I just wanted you to know, so you would not think she was being defiant or anything." Sarah felt a pang of sympathy for a child she had not yet met. "Thank you for telling me. I will make certain she feels welcome." Lucas put his hat back on, shading those dark eyes. "I appreciate it, Miss Garrett, truly. Those children, they are everything to me." He paused. "If you ever need anything, anything at all, my ranch is easy to find. Just follow the south road until you see the stone arch. That is the entrance to Shepherd Land." After he left, Sarah stood outside the school for a moment, watching his tall figure stride down the street toward a waiting horse. There had been something in his voice when he spoke of the children, a tenderness that sat strangely with his rough exterior. She shook her head and went back inside. It did not matter. Lucas Shepard was just a parent, nothing more. She had learned her lesson about men and their seeming kindness. The next morning, Emma and Jack arrived at school riding double on a gentle gray mare. Lucas helped Emma down, his large hands careful as he lifted her. The little girl had honey-colored hair in 2 braids and solemn hazel eyes that seemed to take in everything. Jack looked more like his uncle, tall for his age with the same dark hair, but his eyes were full of mischief. "You two behave for Miss Garrett," Lucas said, crouching down to their level. "Jack, that means you keep your lizards at home. Emma, remember what we practiced." "You can write down anything you need to tell Miss Garrett." Emma nodded seriously. Jack grinned. "I only brought one lizard, Uncle Lucas." Jack, "Fine, fine. No lizards at school." But the boy was still grinning as he pulled a small jar from his pocket and handed it over. Lucas sighed, the expression of a man who had fought this battle before and knew he would fight it many times again. Sarah found herself almost smiling despite her determination to remain distant and professional. "I am sure we will get along just fine, Mr. Shepherd. Children, come inside and I will show you where to sit." Over the following weeks, Sarah fell into a routine. She woke early, prepared lessons, taught from 8 until 3, then spent her evenings grading papers and planning for the next day. The children were eager learners, hungry for knowledge in the way of children who had gone too long without it. Emma communicated through a small slate she carried, writing her questions and answers in careful letters. Jack was bright but easily distracted, always looking out the window or fiddling with whatever he had hidden in his pockets. Lucas came by every few days, ostensibly to check on the children, but often staying to help with small repairs around the school. He fixed the door that stuck, replaced a broken window pane, and brought wood for the stove as the weather grew colder. He was a man of few words, but Sarah noticed that he listened carefully when she talked about the children's progress, his face softening with pride when she mentioned something Emma had written or a sum Jack had mastered. "You do not have to do all this," Sarah said one afternoon as he replaced a section of floorboard that had rotted through. "The school board is supposed to arrange for repairs." "The school board is made up of miners who are too busy digging for silver to fix a floor," Lucas replied, not looking up from his work. "Besides, I want to help. You are good with Emma and Jack. That is worth more than a few hours of carpentry." Sarah watched him work, his movements economical and sure. There was something peaceful about being around him, something that made the constant anxiety in her chest ease just slightly. It frightened her, that feeling. She did not want to feel anything at all. "Mr. Shepherd, might I ask you something, Lucas?" "And yes, madam." "Why did you take in your niece and nephew? You are a single man running a ranch. It must be incredibly difficult to care for 2 young children on your own. There must have been other family who could have taken them." He sat back on his heels, considering his answer. "My brother's wife had no living relatives. My parents are dead. There was an aunt back east who offered, but she did not really want them. I could tell from her letter. She would have taken them out of duty, not love. Those kids had just lost everything. I could not send them to someone who saw them as a burden." He returned to his work. "Besides, they are not a burden to me. They are a gift. Only gift my brother ever gave me when you get right down to it. You are not close. We were when we were young. Drifted apart as we got older. He wanted to mine, I wanted to ranch. He thought I was crazy for buying land out here, sinking everything I had into cattle. Maybe I was. It is not an easy life." Lucas drove in a nail with 3 solid strikes. "But when he got sick, dying so fast neither of us expected it, all the old grievances just fell away. He asked me to take care of his kids. I promised I would. So I do." The simplicity of it struck Sarah. A promise made and kept, not because it was easy but because it was right. How rare that seemed in her experience. "They are lucky to have you," she said quietly. Lucas looked up at her then, really looked at her, and Sarah felt something shift in the air between them. "I am the lucky one, Miss Garrett. Those kids gave me purpose when I was just drifting." Running a ranch, working from dawn to dusk, It can make a man feel alone even when he is surrounded by cattle and ranch hands. Emma and Jack, they made the house feel like a home. Sarah wanted to say something, but the words caught in her throat. There was a kindness in Lucas Shepherd that disarmed her, made her want to trust him even though every instinct screamed that trust was dangerous. She settled for nodding and returning to her desk, pretending to review lessons while her heart beat too fast in her chest. November arrived with a snowstorm that blanketed Bannack in white. Sarah woke to find frost on the inside of her window and could see her breath in her room. She dressed in layers, shivering, and made her way to the school through snow that came up to her ankles. Several children were absent, kept home by parents who did not want them traveling in the cold. But Emma and Jack were there, arriving with Lucas, who insisted on walking them to the door. "Roads are bad," he said. "I will pick them up this afternoon. Do not let them try to ride home alone." "I would not dream of it," Sarah assured him. "Stay warm, Mr. Shepherd." "Lucas," he corrected, as he had done at least a dozen times now, "and you stay warm too. That stove looks like it is struggling." He was right. The schoolhouse, which had been merely cool in October, was downright cold now. Sarah kept the children moving, having them stand and stretch frequently, running through arithmetic tables while marching in place. By midday, she could see her breath inside despite the fire in the stove. When Lucas arrived that afternoon, his face darkened with concern. "This will not do. You cannot teach in a building this cold. We are managing. Managing is not good enough." He looked around, assessing the space with a rancher's practical eye. "The chinking between those logs is failing. Wind is getting in through a dozen gaps, and that stove is too small for a room this size. The school board provided what they could afford. Then the school board needs to do better." Lucas walked the perimeter of the room, stopping to touch the walls, peer at the ceiling. "I can re-chink the walls, but it is too cold now for the mud to set properly. We will have to wait until spring for that, but I can get you a better stove, something that will actually heat this place." "I cannot ask you to do that." "You are not asking, I am offering." His voice was firm. "Miss Garrett, Sarah, if I may call you that. You are teaching 15 children in a building that is barely better than being outside. Something has to be done." Hearing him say her given name sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the fire in the stove. She should correct him, insist on formality, but she found she did not want to. "All right, Lucas. If you are certain it is not too much trouble." "No trouble at all." 3 days later, a wagon arrived at the school with a cast iron stove twice the size of the old one. Lucas and 2 of his ranch hands spent the afternoon installing it, running the pipe through the roof, making sure everything was secure and safe. When they lit it that evening to test it, the difference was immediate and dramatic. Within an hour, the schoolhouse was genuinely warm for the first time since Sarah had arrived. "This is wonderful," she said, standing close to the stove and feeling the heat seep into her bones. "The children will be so much more comfortable." "How much do I owe you?" Lucas waved the question away. "Consider it an investment in education." "Lucas, that stove must have cost at least $30. I cannot let you." "It is done, Sarah. Please just accept it." He was watching her with those steady dark eyes, and Sarah felt something crack in the walls she had built around her heart. This man, this quiet rancher who had no obligation to her whatsoever, had just spent a significant amount of money to make sure she and her students would not freeze through the winter. Not for recognition or praise, but simply because it needed doing. "Thank you," she whispered. "Truly. This is one of the kindest things anyone has ever done for me." He looked surprised, then sad. "Then people have not been very kind to you, and that is a shame." After he left, Sarah sat at her desk in the warm schoolroom and felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She did not fully understand why she was crying. Gratitude, certainly, but also something deeper, something that felt like a door opening inside her that she had sealed shut. It terrified her. Winter deepened and Bannack settled into the quiet hibernation that came with mountain cold and deep snow. Sarah's days took on a rhythm she found comforting in its predictability. Teach, grade papers, take meals with Martha and the other boarders, sleep, and wake to do it all again. She wrote letters to a cousin in St. Louis, careful missives that spoke of her work and the weather and nothing of the loneliness that sometimes threatened to swallow her whole. Lucas continued to visit the school regularly. He always had a reason, checking on the stove, bringing firewood, asking about the children's progress. But increasingly, Sarah noticed he would linger after the children left, helping her straighten the benches or clean the blackboard, talking about his ranch, and the cattle and the hard work of keeping everything running through the winter. "I have 12 hands working for me," he told her one December afternoon as they stood by the window watching snow fall. "Good men, most of them. Loyal, but it is hard to find reliable help out here. A lot of men drift, looking for the next opportunity, the next piece of silver someone else dug up. They do not want to work for wages when they think they could strike it rich." "You never wanted to mine?" Sarah asked. "No. Watching my brother and his friends always chasing the next claim, never satisfied with what they had. That is no life for me. I would rather build something lasting. Cattle are reliable if you treat them right, if you plan for the bad years and do not get greedy during the good ones. It is honest work. You sound like you love it." "I do." He turned from the window to look at her. "What about you? Do you love teaching?" Sarah considered the question. "I love the children. I love seeing them learn, watching their faces when something suddenly makes sense that was confusing before. As for teaching itself, I suppose I love it well enough. It is a respectable profession for a woman. That is not the same as saying you wanted to be a teacher." "No," she admitted. "It is not." "What did you want?" Before you came here, the question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that, not in months, maybe not ever, at least not in a way that suggested they truly wanted to know the answer. "I wanted what most women want, I suppose," she said carefully. "A home, a family, security, love." She laughed, but it came out bitter. "I was foolish enough to think I had found it." Lucas waited, not pushing, but his silence was an invitation. And suddenly, Sarah found herself telling him, the words spilling out like water from a cracked dam. She told him about Thomas, about the years of courtship and the promises made, about how she had believed every word, turned down other suitors, waited patiently for him to be ready for marriage. About the terrible day when she learned from a newspaper announcement that he had married another woman, someone she had never even heard him mention. "I was not even worth a conversation," she said, her voice shaking. "Not worth the honesty of him telling me to my face that he had changed his mind. I had to find out from a newspaper, Lucas, and then I had to go to church and the market and social functions and see everyone looking at me with pity. Poor Sarah Garrett, the woman who was not good enough." "He was a fool," Lucas said quietly, "or maybe I was the fool for believing him." "No." His voice was firm. "Believing someone you care about is not foolish. It is what we are supposed to do. He broke your trust. That is his failing, not yours." Sarah wiped at her eyes, frustrated with herself for crying. "I thought coming here would help. A fresh start where no one knew me, where I could just be the schoolteacher and nothing more. But I brought all of it with me, Lucas. The hurt and the shame and this terrible fear that I will never be able to trust anyone again." Lucas reached out slowly, giving her time to move away, and gently took her hand. His palm was calloused from work, warm and solid. "I cannot speak to what you went through, but I can tell you that not all men are like Thomas. Some of us keep our promises." Some of us know that a person's worth is not about money or connections. It is about who they are, how they treat others, whether they show up when things get hard. Sarah looked down at their joined hands. She should pull away. She should maintain professional distance. But his touch felt like an anchor in a storm, and she was so tired of drowning alone. "I am afraid," she whispered. "I am afraid to hope for anything more than what I have right now, because hoping for more, that is what led to heartbreak before." Lucas squeezed her hand gently. "I understand that fear, maybe more than you know. After my brother died, after I saw how fast life can change, how people we love can be taken from us without warning, I was afraid too. Afraid to get too close to Emma and Jack, because what if something happened to them? What if I loved them and lost them? But then I realized that the fear was going to rob me of the time I did have with them. So I decided that love was worth the risk. And if you lose them anyway, then I will have had the privilege of loving them. That has to be enough." He paused. "Sarah, I am not asking you for anything you are not ready to give, but I want you to know that I see you, not the woman who was not good enough for some fool back in St. Louis. I see the woman who came to a rough mining town alone and built a life here. The woman who is patient with my niece, even though she cannot speak. The woman who makes Jack sit still long enough to learn his multiplication tables, which I am pretty sure is some kind of miracle. I see you, and what I see is someone remarkable." Sarah felt something shift inside her, like ice beginning to thaw after a long winter. It hurt, that thawing, the way frozen fingers hurt when warmth finally reaches them. But it was also a relief so profound she almost sobbed with it. "I do not know how to do this," she admitted. "I do not know how to let someone in again. We can go slow as you need. I am not going anywhere, Sarah." They stood there for a long moment, hands clasped, snow falling outside the window. When Lucas finally left, Sarah sat at her desk and pressed her palm to her chest, feeling her heart beat. For the first time in months, it did not feel broken. Bruised, certainly, tender and wary, but not broken. Christmas came with a storm that shut down the town for 3 days. When the snow finally stopped and people began digging out, Lucas arrived at the boarding house with Emma and Jack in tow, all 3 of them bundled against the cold. "We brought you something," Jack announced, barging into the parlor where Sarah was reading. Emma followed more quietly, carrying a basket covered with a cloth. "Jack manners," Lucas reminded him, but he was smiling. "What Jack means is that we wanted to wish you a Merry Christmas and bring you a small gift." Emma lifted the cloth to reveal a loaf of bread, a jar of preserves, and half a dozen apples that must have been carefully stored to last this long into winter. Sarah felt her throat tighten. "We picked the apples ourselves," Jack said proudly, "from the trees behind the house. And Uncle Lucas made the preserves. He is really good at it, even though he says it is not manly work, whatever that means." "Jack," Lucas said, his ears reddening slightly. Sarah took the basket, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of it. "This is wonderful. Thank you so much, all of you." She looked at Lucas. "I did not get you anything. I did not think, you teach my niece and nephew, that is gift enough." But he looked pleased by her reaction, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Emma pulled out her slate and wrote quickly, then held it up. "We wanted to say thank you for being nice." "Oh, sweetheart." Sarah knelt down so she was eye level with the little girl. "You do not need to thank me for that. Being nice should be the expectation, not a gift." Emma wrote again. "Uncle Lucas says you are the best teacher we ever had." "Uncle Lucas exaggerates." "No, he does not," Jack interjected. "Mrs. Henderson was mean and her breath smelled like old cheese. You are much better." "Jack," Lucas looked mortified, but Sarah could not help laughing. It felt good to laugh, light and free in a way she had almost forgotten. They stayed for an hour, drinking tea that Martha brought in with knowing smiles, talking about the storm and the holidays. Emma sat close to Sarah on the sofa, leaning against her shoulder in a display of trust that made Sarah's heart ache. When had she become important to these children? When had they become important to her? As they were leaving, Lucas hung back while the children ran ahead to the wagon. "I meant what Jack said about you being a wonderful teacher. But more than that, you have been wonderful for them. For me too." He hesitated. "Sarah, I would like to call on you properly, not just showing up at the school but actually courting you, if you are amenable to that." Sarah's first instinct was to say no, to protect herself, to retreat behind her walls. But then she thought of what Lucas had said about fear robbing him of time with Emma and Jack. She thought about how empty her life had felt before Bannack, before teaching, before this quiet man who showed up again and again with no expectation of anything in return. "Yes," she heard herself say, "I am amenable to that." His face broke into a smile that transformed him, made him look younger and less careworn. "Really, really. But Lucas, you need to understand that I cannot," she struggled for words. "I need time, I need to go slowly. I need you to be patient with me because there are days when I still hear Thomas's lies in my head and I doubt everything." "I can be patient," Lucas said. "I am a rancher, Sarah. Patience is part of the work. You do not rush cattle or crops or anything worth having. We will go at whatever pace you need." After they left, Sarah stood at the window and watched the wagon disappear down the snowy street. Her hands were shaking again, but this time not from fear, from possibility. From the terrifying, wonderful thought that maybe, just maybe, she could hope again. True to his word, Lucas courted her with a patience that astonished Sarah. He came to Sunday dinners at the boarding house, sitting at the long table with the other boarders and helping Martha clear plates afterward. He took Sarah on walks through town when the weather permitted, talking about everything and nothing, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. He brought her books from his small collection at the ranch, volumes of poetry and history that they discussed during the quiet hours after school. January melted into February, and Sarah found herself looking forward to his visits with an anticipation that both thrilled and frightened her. She noticed small things, the way he always held doors for her, how he listened when she talked about her students without interrupting or trying to solve problems she had not asked for help with, the careful way he never presumed to touch her beyond offering his arm when they walked. "You are being courted," Martha said one evening with satisfaction. "Properly courted by a good man. You should see your face when he comes by, Sarah. You light up. I do not. You do, and there is no shame in it. Lucas Shepard is one of the finest men in this territory. Works hard, treats his ranch hands fairly, took in those children without a second thought. He would be a good husband." The word husband made Sarah's chest tighten with anxiety. "It is too soon to talk about that." "Is it? You have been seeing him exclusively for 2 months now." "In a town like this, that is practically an engagement. We are taking things slowly." Martha gave her a knowing look. "Just do not take things so slowly that you miss the opportunity, dear. Good men do not stay available forever." But Lucas showed no signs of going anywhere. In March, when the snow began to melt and the first hints of spring appeared, he asked if Sarah would like to visit the ranch. "I want you to see where Emma and Jack live, where I live. It is important to me that you know all of it." She agreed, and the following Saturday, Lucas drove her out in his wagon. The ranch spread across a wide valley, bordered by mountains on 3 sides. The house was larger than Sarah had expected, a solid log structure with a wide porch and glass windows that must have cost a fortune to transport. Cattle grazed in distant pastures, dark shapes against the greening grass. "It is beautiful," Sarah said, genuinely awed by the scope of it. "It is home." Lucas helped her down from the wagon. "Come on, I will show you around." He introduced her to his ranch hands, men with weathered faces who treated Lucas with obvious respect. He showed her the barns and the cattle pens, the chicken coop where Emma collected eggs every morning, the small creek that ran through the property. But it was the house that captivated Sarah. Inside, it was furnished simply but comfortably. A large main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen with a cast iron stove, bedrooms upstairs. What struck Sarah most were the small touches that spoke of children living there. Slates and books stacked on a table, a rag doll sitting in a chair, drawings pinned to the wall. "Emma drew those," Lucas said, noticing her looking. "She might not talk, but she is good at showing what is in her head through pictures." Sarah studied the drawings, simple but expressive sketches of horses and mountains and people. In one, a tall figure stood between two smaller ones, all three holding hands. "Is this you with Emma and Jack?" "Yes. She drew that a few months after they came to live with me. I had it framed, but she asked me to take it out, said it needed to be where she could see it every day." His voice was soft. "That is when I knew we were going to be all right." They had lunch in the kitchen, sandwiches and coffee, sitting at a scarred wooden table that had clearly hosted many meals. Lucas talked about his plans for the ranch, how he wanted to expand the herd, improve the grazing land, build a new barn. "It all sounds wonderful," Sarah said. "You have built something impressive here, Lucas. I want to build more." He reached across the table and took her hand, his touch familiar now but still sending warmth through her. "Sarah, these past few months with you, they have been the happiest I have had in a long time. Seeing you, talking with you, watching you with Emma and Jack, it has made me realize how much I want a partner in life, someone to share all of this with." Sarah's heart began to race. "Lucas, I am not proposing, not yet. I know you need more time. But I want you to know my intentions are serious. I am courting you because I am falling in love with you, because I want to marry you someday when you are ready. I want you here, on this ranch, as my wife." The words hung in the air between them. Sarah felt a wave of emotion so intense she could barely breathe. Love, marriage, a future, everything she had wanted with Thomas being offered again by this steady, honest man. "I care about you," she said slowly. "More than I thought I could care about anyone again, but Lucas, I am still afraid. What if I trust you and you change your mind? What if I am not enough? What if—" "Sarah, listen to me." He came around the table and knelt beside her chair, still holding her hand. "I cannot promise that nothing bad will ever happen. Life does not work that way. But I can promise that I will never lie to you. I will never make promises I do not intend to keep. What I feel for you, it is real. It is not going to change because of money or family pressure or any other reason. I want you, just you, exactly as you are." Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now. "How can you be so certain?" "Because I have spent 30 years on this earth learning what matters. And what matters is integrity, loyalty, showing up for the people you love. You have those qualities. So do I. That is a foundation we can build on." He reached up and gently wiped her tears with his thumb. "Take all the time you need. I will be here." Sarah leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "It terrifies me, but I am. Then we will be terrified together." Spring arrived in earnest, transforming the mountains around Bannack from white to green. The school year was nearing its end, and Sarah began planning a small celebration for the students. Lucas helped her organize it, turning up with supplies donated from the ranch, food for a picnic, wood for games, ribbons for prizes. The day of the celebration was bright and warm, the sky a brilliant blue. Parents came to watch their children demonstrate what they had learned over the year. Emma stood at the front of the room and held up a slate with a story she had written, each sentence carefully crafted. Jack recited his multiplication tables without a single mistake, then immediately asked if he could go play. Sarah watched it all with pride and a sense of accomplishment that went deeper than she had expected. Afterward, as families spread out blankets for the picnic, Lucas pulled Sarah aside. "I have something for you." He handed her a small wooden box, beautifully carved with a pattern of flowers. Sarah opened it to find a cameo brooch, delicate and old-fashioned. "It was my mother's," Lucas said. "She left it to me when she died, said I should give it to the woman I wanted to marry." He took a breath. "Sarah, I know we have been taking things slowly. I know you need time and certainty before you can say yes to forever. But I want you to have this now, as a promise that I will wait as long as you need, that my intentions are honorable and my feelings are true." Sarah looked at the brooch, then at Lucas, this man who had spent months proving himself through actions rather than words, who had been patient with her fears, gentle with her heart, steady as the mountains around them. "I do not need more time," she said suddenly. The realization crystallized as she spoke. "Lucas, I have been so afraid of hoping, so afraid of being hurt again, that I did not see what was right in front of me. You have given me reasons to hope every single day. Through your kindness to me, your love for Emma and Jack, the way you show up again and again without asking for anything in return, you have proven who you are. I trust you. Sarah, I love you. I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you on that ranch, teach those children, maybe have children of our own someday. I want all of it, Lucas. With you." His face went through a series of emotions too quick to track, landing on joy so pure it made her breath catch. "You mean it, truly, truly." Lucas picked her up and spun her around, laughing, and Sarah laughed too, giddy with relief and happiness. When he set her down, he kissed her, right there in front of half the town, and Sarah kissed him back, no longer caring who saw or what they thought. This was her life, her choice, her future. They were married a month later in the small church at the edge of Bannack. Emma served as flower girl, solemn in a new dress, while Jack proudly handed over the rings. Martha cried happy tears and the ranch hands attended in their Sunday best. It was simple and perfect, exactly what Sarah wanted. The wedding night, Sarah was nervous, but Lucas was gentle, patient, letting her set the pace as he had with everything else. "We have our whole lives," he whispered as he held her. "There is no rush." "I love you," Sarah said, marveling that she could say it without fear now. "I love you so much." "I love you too. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret taking a chance on me." Sarah moved into the ranch house, transforming from schoolteacher to rancher's wife. She continued teaching, driving into town 3 days a week for classes, the other days spent helping manage the household and the business side of the ranch. Lucas had been right. They made good partners. Sarah had a head for numbers and organization, skills that proved invaluable as the ranch continued to grow. Emma began speaking again 6 months after the wedding. It started with a single word, "Yes," spoken so quietly Sarah almost missed it. But over the following weeks, more words came, hesitant at first but gaining strength. The little girl would never be particularly talkative, but the fact that she chose to speak again felt like a gift, a sign that she felt safe enough to open that part of herself again. "You did that," Lucas said one night as they lay in bed. "You made her feel safe enough to find her voice." "We did that," Sarah corrected. "Together." The years unfold like the opening of a flower, each season bringing new joys and challenges. Sarah gave birth to their first child in the spring of 1879, a boy they named Matthew. Lucas wept when he held his son for the first time, overwhelmed by the weight of new life in his arms. Sarah watched him, This strong man made tender by love and felt her own heart swell with happiness. Emma and Jack doted on their baby cousin, helping with feedings and eager to rock him when he fussed. The house that had once been quiet and orderly became noisy and chaotic, filled with the sounds of children laughing and crying and playing. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, Clara, with her mother's blonde hair and her father's dark eyes. And 2 years after that, another son, Daniel, who came into the world screaming and barely stopped for the next 6 months. "Our family is complete," Lucas said one night, watching Sarah nurse Daniel while Clara slept against his shoulder and Matthew and the older children played on the floor. "Is this what you imagined when you first came to Bannack?" "No," Sarah said honestly. "This is so much better than anything I imagined. Lucas, do you remember what I told you that day at the school? How I was afraid to hope?" "I remember. You spent forever giving me reasons to hope. Through your actions, your patience, your love, you proved that not all promises are empty. Some men keep their word." Lucas shifted Clara slightly so he could lean over and kiss Sarah. "You gave me reasons too. Reasons to believe that life could be more than just work and duty. That love makes everything richer and fuller. We saved each other, I think." Sarah thought back to the woman she had been, stepping off that stagecoach alone and heartbroken, convinced she would never trust again. That woman felt like someone from a different life. She had been transformed by this place, these people, this man who had seen her worth when she could barely see it herself. The ranch continued to thrive. Lucas expanded the cattle operation and bought adjacent land when it became available. Sarah opened a small school on the ranch property, teaching not just Emma, Jack, and their own children, but also the children of ranch hands and neighboring homesteaders. It was less formal than the town school, but Sarah found she preferred it, the flexibility to teach at different paces, to spend more time on subjects that interested her students. Emma grew into a thoughtful young woman who loved horses and had her uncle's gift for working with animals. Jack, as mischievous as ever, nonetheless showed a talent for ranching that made Lucas proud. "He will be running this place someday," Lucas said with satisfaction, "if he can stay out of trouble long enough to learn everything he needs to know." Matthew, Clara, and Daniel grew up surrounded by open space and the kind of freedom that came from living on a working ranch. They learned to ride before they could barely walk, helped with chores as soon as they were able, absorbed lessons about hard work and responsibility from their parents' example. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Lucas took Sarah back to the spot where he had first told her he was falling in love with her, the kitchen table in the ranch house. They sat in the same chairs, holding hands across the scarred wood. 10 years, Lucas marveled. "Feels like both forever and no time at all." "I know what you mean." Sarah squeezed his hand. "Lucas, I need to tell you something. I am with child again." His eyes widened. "Really, Sarah, that is wonderful." Then concern crossed his face. "Are you happy about it?" "I know 4 children is already a lot." "I am happy," Sarah assured him. "Surprised but happy. This baby was unexpected, but the best things in my life have been unexpected. You were unexpected." "You were definitely unexpected," Lucas agreed. "I had convinced myself I would be a bachelor forever. Just me and the ranch, and eventually Emma and Jack growing up and leaving. Then you walked into my life and changed everything." Their 4th child, a daughter named Grace, arrived in late 1889, a perfect end to a decade that had transformed both their lives. She was a placid baby, content to be passed from sibling to sibling, watching the world with calm interest. As the 1890s began, Bannack was changing. The silver was playing out, mines closing, people drifting away to other towns with more promise. But the ranch remained constant, a pocket of stability in a shifting world. Lucas and Sarah had built something that would last, that would be passed down to their children and their children's children. On a warm summer evening in 1895, the whole family gathered on the porch after supper. Emma, now 26, was engaged to one of the ranch hands, a steady young man named Peter who treated her with the kindness she deserved. Jack, at 28, was running much of the day-to-day ranch operations, though he still answered to Lucas on major decisions. Matthew was 16 and already taller than his father. Clara was 14 and showing her mother's gift for teaching. Daniel was 12 and collecting lizards just as Jack had done at that age. And Grace was a thoughtful 5-year-old who rarely let her father out of her sight. "Tell us about when you met," Grace demanded, as she often did. "Tell us about Mama being afraid." Lucas looked at Sarah, his eyes full of love and memories. "Should I tell it or should you?" "You tell it," Sarah said. "You tell it better." So Lucas told the story, how he had come to the school looking for help for his niece and nephew, how he had seen the new teacher with her sad eyes and realized she needed someone to believe in her, how he had fixed floors and brought stoves and shown up again and again until she finally let him past her walls. "I was so afraid," Sarah added. "I thought hoping for anything was foolish, but your father taught me that hope is not foolish, it is brave. Choosing to hope, choosing to love, that is the bravest thing we can do." "And they lived happily ever after," Grace said with satisfaction. "We did," Lucas agreed. "We absolutely did." Later, after the children had gone to bed, Lucas and Sarah remained on the porch, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Sarah leaned against her husband, his arm around her shoulders, and reflected on the strange path that had brought her here. "Do you ever think about what your life would be like if you had stayed in St. Louis?" Lucas asked quietly. "Sometimes," Sarah admitted, "but only to be grateful I left. If Thomas had not broken my heart, if I had not come to Bannack, I never would have met you. I never would have had this life. In a strange way, I am grateful to him for teaching me what I did not want. It made me recognize what I did want when you offered it." "What did you want?" "Honesty, integrity, a partner who showed up, someone who kept promises." She looked up at him. "You gave me all of that and more. You gave me reasons to hope when I thought I had run out of reasons. You were patient when I needed patience, steady when I needed something to hold on to. You loved me when I could barely love myself." "You did the same for me," Lucas said. "I was just existing before you came. Working, raising the kids, but not really living. You taught me that there is more to life than survival. That joy is possible, even necessary. That love makes everything better." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from years of knowing another person so well that words are not always necessary. The ranch stretched around them, land they had worked and improved and poured their hearts into. Inside the house, their children slept, safe and loved. It was a simple life in many ways, but it was theirs, built on a foundation of trust and hope and promises kept. "I love you," Sarah said, as she had said countless times over the years but never grew tired of saying. "I love you too," Lucas replied. "Forever." And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. As the new century approached, bringing with it changes and challenges that would reshape the West, Lucas and Sarah Shepherd faced it together, their hands clasped, their hearts full, their hope unshakable. They had learned that love is not just a feeling but a choice, made over and over, day after day, through good times and hard times, through fear and through joy. Sarah had whispered once that she was afraid to hope. Lucas had spent forever, one day at a time, one action at a time, giving her reasons. And those reasons had built a life, a family, a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone. In the end, that was what mattered. Not the grand gestures or dramatic moments, but the steady, faithful, everyday choice to show up, to keep promises, to love even when it was difficult, to hope even when it was frightening. That was their story. That was there forever. And it was beautiful.